I did a video where I showed all the defects I found on this frame and I showed how to fix those. If you really want to understand why I say don't buy a Twitter carbon frame, check out that video. So in today's video, we're going to take this once poorly made trash frame. We're going to build it up into a gravel bike you might actually want to ride. If that interests you, let's get started. Before I do anything else, I need to get these bearings to actually fit in the frame. If I look at this, there appears to be a ridge around the top that is maybe filler or epoxy. I am going to use some 220 grit sandpaper and I'm going to sand that off, and I'm going to work until I can get the bearing to drop in place. After I got it so I could actually fit bearings into the frame, I made a tool that I could use to cut the seats. This is 3D printed and I designed it to fit perfectly into the head tube. It'll cut the angle and size the diameter for the bearing in one pass. I need to be able to see the high spots in this seat as I sand it, so I marked the seats with some paint and I sanded the seats. You can see there are quite a few high spots in this seat and even a couple gaps where seams came together. It looks like they left a little bit of silicone in the head tube. I reached in there and pulled it out with a pair of pliers. It didn't come easily, it came out in about 100 pieces. The bearing seats are hollow and really thin in spots. I filled them in with some JB Weld steel stick. This is the underside of the seat once the JB Weld is pressed in place. The JB Weld provides a lot of support and we no longer have to worry about how thin those seats are. The bottom bracket shell is not round and the face is not flat. To dress the shell, I made another tool. This fits into the bottom bracket shell perfectly, and I've added sandpaper so it will cut a new face. After sanding, this leaves a perfectly flat surface ready for the bottom bracket. If you look at the inside of the seat tube, right next to the relief for the seat clamp, it's really thin. There's a major defect there, and it's only about half as thick as the rest of the tube. That extends all the way to the relief. I've now got most of the problems on this frame fixed. The last thing I've got to do is repair the seat post. I am going to convert the frame to a seat mast. So basically, I'm going to take a carbon tube, I'm going to insert it inside the seat post and bond it in place with epoxy. And then I'm going to cut it to length and I'm going to use a seat mast topper. I am using a hard set epoxy to bond the carbon tube into the seat tube. This should do a better job of filling in the gaps. To ensure the gaps had enough epoxy, I used a copper pipe and I pushed the epoxy into the low spots. I then coated the tube with hard set and I twisted it into place. I left some scratches in the paint, so once I was done with the repair, I buffed those out with a polisher and some rubbing compound. I wanted to disguise the filler so it wasn't so obvious, so I used some acrylic enamel paint and I painted it to match. When they made this dismount, they didn't get it flat. When I run my finger along it, I can feel that there's a low spot right here, and it's got a bit of a wave to it. If I try to put a disc brake caliper on here and tighten it down, getting it aligned correctly is going to be difficult because this is not a flat surface. I have the fork mounted in my new mill. I've fitted a brand new 5/16 inch end mill. I went with that one because it's the only new mill I have. I've found that carbon likes a good sharp tool. I'm going to take a light pass. I don't know how the carbon is going to react, so I want to see if I'm going to have any trouble when I mill it. It'll also let me know just how flat that mount really is. I measured the steerer with some calipers and it is not round. It's wider in this dimension where you see this seam. So I need to make it round. Just like before, I 3D printed a tool. So this is a round tool that holds a piece of sandpaper and it's designed so it fits perfectly over the steerer. When I turn this, it'll sand the steerer down and it should get it to the right dimension. So it should be able to sand off the high spots and make this round. Here's a quick look at the parts I'm going to use to put this Twitter V1 together. I'm going to run a GRX RX815 drivetrain. This is a 2x11 electronic Di2. I'm going to use a GRX RX810 crank. This is a 48-31. And I'm going to use the matching series GRX brakes. I'm going to run a carbon integrated handlebar. This one is made by RXL. And a 3D printed saddle. This one is also carbon. I like this one simply because it's got a really neat logo. It's not what we would typically see on stuff you buy from China on Amazon. And then I've got the seat mast topper and the integrated headset that goes with these bars. Here's a fun fact. I generally script my videos, so I plan out what I'm going to say and what shots I'm going to take. So if you ever see these pieces of paper laying around my shop, that's what you're looking at. These are scripts. The hardest part of putting one of these frames together that's got internal cable routing is getting the wires and the hoses through the handlebar and through the head tube. I've found that there's a sequence you got to kind of stick to. I run the wires through first. I do that because they've got a large head that needs room, but then once they're in place, they don't take up too much space. After the wires are in place, then I pull through the hydraulic hose. This stuff isn't very flexible, so that can be difficult to do. What I do is I pull it through and I pull an entire roll with the handlebars. So I'll put the cable or the hose through the bars and then I'll put the bars on the frame. If you've ever wondered, Robert, what's the dumbest thing you've done on a bike build? This is the dumbest thing I've done on a bike build. I just spent an hour and a whole lot of frustration getting this fork put in, and I realized I forgot to cut down the steerer tube. So I've got to pull it all back apart so I can cut this down to the right length. This frame uses internally routed cables. They're routed through the headset, so it requires a special headset. I bought the headset cap and spacers that match the handlebars, so I made my own compression washer so the two would work together. The wired Di2 system is a really simple system, and we only need a few components. We've got the shifters up front. Those are going to connect to a junction in the handlebar that includes the charge port and a mode switch. From there, it's going to run down to a junction somewhere around the bottom bracket, and that's going to provide connection for both derailleurs and for the battery. This frame uses the BB92 bottom bracket standard. That's a press fit bottom bracket. I like to use these Wheels Manufacturing thread together bottom brackets for any frame I put together that would normally use a press fit. The torque spec for Shimano's Hollowtech crank arms is 12 to 14 Newton meters. I usually just split the difference and I torque them to 13. I'm using a set of Shimano GRX wheels on this bike. These are the RX 570s. I've got a set of WTB Crossboss 35mm tires fitted. These are a set of wheels I use for gravel riding when the route's got a lot of pavement. I got the bike put together and I took it out and did a 30-mile gravel ride. I went up to Boulder, I took it on one of my favorite routes. The bike actually did really well. It's fast, it's comfortable, and it's quite responsive. Best yet, it didn't break in half on me. I had filmed an entire sequence that I was going to share with you guys for that ride, but I've decided to leave it out of today's video. I don't want somebody to see just that part of the video or see it out of context and think that I'm recommending this Twitter bike. Twitter USA actually commented on the video where I showed how to repair the defects on this frame. Their response was long, but the gist was they consider these raw frames to be fitted or built by professionals, and if you want a good one, you got to buy a complete bike. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. No professional is going to tackle a bike with defects like this. You don't paint and put decals on a raw frame. What I suspect is really happening is Twitter is building complete bikes, and the frames that they find defective, they're selling off as bare frames. My interaction with Twitter bikes left such a bad taste in my mouth, I can't wait to get their name off of it. I've decided I want to rebrand it. Since I put it together, I fixed it, I built it, it's my bike, I'm going to put my own brand on it. Unfortunately, I've got to strip the bike back down, so I've got to remove everything, including cutting the hydraulic lines and pulling those out of the frame. I wish I'd done this before I put the bike together, but at that time I didn't know just how bad Twitter Bikes was. For the rebranding, I needed to remove all the original decals. I used some 600 grit wet or dry sandpaper and I just sanded those off. For the new paint scheme, I wanted to go with something similar to 3T's Exploro, so I used some string and I laid out some mask lines. I then sanded the original paint out to 600 grit, and I gave the bike 2 coats of Subaru's Cool Khaki Gray. I designed new decals in Photoshop. I sent those over to my laser cutter and I cut them out. I took some careful measurements to make sure everything was symmetric. I masked out some guidelines and I installed the decals. I was being really careful. I wanted to make sure I didn't damage that fresh paint. To finish the rebranding, I scuffed the entire frame and I gave it 2 coats of 2K clear. It's really cold in the workshop right now, so to help the clear coat cure, I made a hot box. I used some cardboard and a space heater. I was able to get the frame up to 125 degrees. I left it in the hot box and let it cure at that temperature for about 2 hours. I then put the bike back together. I didn't record that because it looked the same as the first time I did it. Here's how the bike turned out. I think it looks really nice. Like I mentioned earlier, this actually turned out to be a really good bike. A few days after the rebuild, I raced it in the 23-mile course at Old Man Winter. I actually took the podium on it. I was 12 seconds ahead of second place and a full minute ahead of third. I was really surprised with just how fast this bike is. It's a real shame. Twitter has a good design for a frame here, but it doesn't matter how good the design is if the manufacturing is poor. Some of you have asked, why didn't I return this frame? Well, I reached out to the seller and they never responded to me. But also, it came to me from China. So to return it, I would have to put it in a box and put it back on a boat to China. That would cost me more than the frame is worth. So once I bought it, I owned it. Returning it really was never an option. Every time I make a video where I show how to fix something, I invariably get a host of comments from people saying things like, just buy a new one, or what a waste of your time to save $80, or just send it back, what's wrong with you? And the answer to all of that is, I really enjoy fixing things. It's what I do. You might play video games and spend lots of money doing that, but you don't think that's a waste of time? I don't think this is a waste of time. But more to that point, I'm not the type who just throws something away just because it's broken. Our society has kind of become that, and it really bothers me. An example, most recently our washing machine died. The touch panel stopped working. And instead of just throwing it away and spending $1,000 on a new one, I took it apart, I did a little diagnostic work, and I replaced the control board. Works just like new again. My car is 26 years old and I keep it on the road. Things that could work, that just need a little bit of repair, come on people, don't throw those away. And if there's somebody on the internet who is showing you how to fix them, don't respond with the comment, oh, just buy a new one. So anyway, to get back off of my soapbox now, that's kind of it for today's video. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.